Welcome back to the day 4 of 100 Days of Hell with Python Algo Trading. So in the day 4, we will cover each and every topic of the list, and also we'll be solving some examples so you can understand it much better. So before beginning the Python list, I have few important updates. So let me explain them one by one. The first update is the MCQs are very important. We have researched and curated all of those questions very diligently. So if you attempt those, you will feel that you are having much more better understanding of the topic. And if you really want to learn fast and quick, you have to attempt those questions. It will not cost you anything. Second is task. All the task questions also researched similarly as MCQs. And we have also included Python mini projects for each and every topic. So you can think the process, which we have discussed in the first introduction video, right? The process is 3-stage process. First, we are learning, and then you are applying that knowledge at 3 places: MCQs, Python task, and then mini project. So it will cement that task in your brain for generations. Now the Discord and Telegram. So it's not mandatory. If you have questions, if you have any queries, you can come and you can ask us. Okay. We will try our best to resolve your all queries, but it's not mandatory for you to come and join. It's just a community. So where we can discuss and we can resolve our issues. Okay. You just have to focus on your learning. That's it. Then we have the fourth, that is doubt clearing session. For that, if you really have some doubts, you can let us know in the Discord or Telegram, and accordingly we will create some sessions on weekends. Okay, or we can have some live sessions also, so we can plan that in future. So that was quick update. Now let's quickly move to the Python list. Okay, so in this session, first we will cover the introduction, then we'll compare the list with the arrays, and then we will see how lists are stored in the memory, right? Then the characteristics of Python list, and then we will see some examples with all the operations, and last but not the least, disadvantages of the Python list. Okay, so now we quickly understand what are the lists. So list is a data type where you can store multiple items under one name. Okay, I'll just quickly explain how. Then more technically, lists act like dynamic arrays, which means you can add more items on the fly. Then we'll understand why lists are required in programming. Okay, so let's create an example of list. So let's say we have a list which contains the details of any trade. So we will name it as trade logs. Okay, this is hyphen. So in that list, we have, let's say, the opening price, then a string. So the name of the stock, Apple, correct? Then we can say the selling price. Okay, so it could be 110.6, which is a float. And then let's say we have a Boolean value, so which can be true, right? For example, if the buy was true or false, so it can be true. So this is integer, this is string, this is float, and this is a Boolean value. And this list is able to store all those data types, right? So which makes it so flexible and so adaptable. Okay, now let's compare the list with arrays. So let's say we create a table. Okay, so the first is for arrays and this is for the list. Okay, then now let's compare it. Okay, so the first point is fixed versus dynamic. Why? Because when we create an array, so how do we do that? We have to give the size beforehand. For example, let's say you are creating an array of int and the size is 50. So here you have to mention that we will be creating an array with the size 50. Means it is fixed, correct? We can say it is fixed. But in list, you don't have to do that. You can create an empty list, or you can create a list which consists multiple values. There is no restriction like that. Then the second point is the arrays are homogeneous. Means these can store only one data type. So here we know that this is integer. If we want an array with a string values, then we have to create another array. Similarly for float and so on and so forth. So means these are homogeneous. The second difference is these are homogeneous. But in list, you can store all data types, right? As we have seen in this example. So let me quickly copy and paste this one. So this is the second point, correct? So I can write it, let second point. These are homogeneous and lists are heterogeneous because these can store integer value, these can store string also, we have float and we have boolean values. So there is no restriction like that. So yes, the lists have these two benefits for sure, but the benefit comes with some disadvantages. And what are those? Let me quickly give this a green color. So we can say these are the pros, we can say, correct? And now we go for some cons. Okay. So in cons, we have the third is the speed of execution. The speed of execution. So here the arrays are fast, but lists are slow in terms of speed. And the fourth point is memory size. So arrays occupy less size, whereas lists occupy more sizes. So we will just understand these 4 points with an example right now. So for that, we need to understand how arrays get stored in the memory. Okay. So let's create an array. For example, int array 50. Correct. Here I want to store these values 1, 2, 3. So how does it work? So in a memory, we have a continuous memory block 1, 2, 3 and up to 50, right? And if I want to store these values, what will happen? This 1 will come here, 2 will here and 3 here. So here also these are the binary patterns. So it will not store in the decimal, it will store in the binary value, and the bits depends on the binary pattern. So it may be like 0, 0, 1, and then the next, the 4 will be of 1. Okay. And here it will start with the 2. Okay. And so on, so forth. It will store the values. Okay. And again, if someone asks what is the memory address of the arrays? Okay. So what it will be? It will be the memory address of the first item, which is 1, right? So whatever the memory address of 1 will be the memory address of array. So this is how the arrays get stored. Okay. Now we have to understand the list also, right? So in list, what happens? Let's take the same example. I want to store 1, 2, 3 in a list. So how does it work? So what will happen? This one will get stored somewhere in the memory. And let's say the address of that memory place is 500. Again, this one is getting stored somewhere, and this 2 and the memory address is 600, and this 3 is getting stored somewhere and the address is 700. Okay. Now what will happen in the list? These addresses will get stored. Okay. Here it will be 500. Here it will be, let's say 600. And here it will be 700. Correct. And those addresses will have their own addresses. So let's say it has 1000. This has 1001. And this is 1002. This is just for example. So now we can say that in the list, we are not storing the actual value. We are storing the memory address of those values, right? So here a new term comes, which is referential array, or you can say pointer address, right? So here we are storing the reference of that actual value. So now when you compare, so now you can say whenever you want to fetch the values from the array, you can directly fetch the value by just giving the address. So it is definitely fast. But in arrays, first you have to call this memory address of the address, right? First stage, then this address will call this address, second stage, and then this address will fetch the value. So it becomes a multi-stage process. So definitely it will be slower than the arrays. And again, the fourth point also is true here because we are storing two values here. So definitely it will be bigger in the size, right? Slower and bigger. It will occupy more space, right? And arrays will occupy less space. So yeah, we can say that lists are powerful, flexible, but comes with some disadvantages. We will learn in the future that how we are able to mitigate these issues with the help of some libraries. And let me also prove this point to you with the help of some example. So let's quickly move to the screen and let me show you how it works. For example, we have a list and let's say it is the trade logs. Okay. And here I'll give the values. So let's say the buying price 100. Then let's say the name of the stock, it was, let's say BTC. And then the selling price. So it could be 1110.9. Then a Boolean value. So it will be true, right? So we can store multiple values, and when I print it out, it will give me the list. But what I'm trying to say here, that when we want to check the address, so what we can do, you can just use the function id, right? So when you apply id here, and when you hit enter, you will see that you have the address, right? This is a memory address. So I will print this. So first I am printing the memory address of the whole list. Okay. So when I hit shift enter, it gives me the address. Then let's say I'll print the addresses of the list values. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And the first will be this 0, this 0 index. So it will be 100. Okay. I'll just copy and paste these values also. Okay. Then second, third. Here I'll change the values 1. Then it will become 2. It will be 3, right? So 0 is 100, 1 is BTC, 2 is 110, and 3 is true, right? So when I hit shift enter, it gives me few values. You can see the last is 5184 for the whole list. Then these are the values for each objects. So now what I will do, I'll just copy and paste these values and paste here. So here, instead of the index, we will just take the values. Okay. So here I'll paste the 100. And next I'll paste the BTC string, and then we can copy and paste the float, and last we have the boolean value. Now what we want to do, we want to check the memory address of these variables and the values. Okay, so when I hit shift enter, so now when you check that the memory address of this float 110.9, here you can see it is different. Okay, 5424, and here we have 7984. Here the memory address is different because the Python uses a technique which is known as the string interning. Okay, and that is out of the scope for now. If you want to explore more, you can go and Google. But now let's understand that because of the string interning, the address is different. Okay, it's only for the floats. Okay, then we have again the 352 boolean, which is equal to 352, right? So now we can conclude that in list, we are storing the memory address of the values, not the actual values, right? So this is how it works. Now we quickly understand some concepts, and then we will jump on the examples. So now generally we have 3 types of list. So one is 1D. So how does it work? So for example, we have a list which contains the trade prices. So 100 and then 110, 120. Okay, and again we have another 1D list which has all the logs of the trade. So for example, we bought the stock at 100 and it was a buy position, and we can also store that we sold it at 120.5. okay, and then also we can say yes, it was a profitable trade, so we can store a boolean value, right? And so here you know that we have an integer here, then we have a string, then we have a float, and we have a boolean value, correct? So the difference between these two lists, that we can say that this is a homogeneous list and this is a heterogeneous list. That is the basic difference. Okay, now we quickly move to the 2D list. So in 2D list, we have a list inside a list. So for example, we can take the same example, this one, and let me quickly copy and okay. So as we already have a list, okay, and we can say we have another list. So let's say we have these values 2, 3, and 4. So what we can say here, this is the main list, right? This is the outer list, correct? This one, and inside that we have 4 values of this list. So first value is this, which itself is a list. Second value is 2, third value is 3, and fourth value is 4. Let's say the identifier of this list is L. So you can say this is at 0 index L0. This is at the index 1. This element is at the index 2, and this is at the L3. Now you just pause the video and answer me this question, that whether this list is a homogeneous list or a heterogeneous list. Let me give you the answer. So here, as we know that we have 4 elements, correct? Out of 4, these 3 are integers, correct? Out of 4, these 3 are integers. This also integer, this is also integer, this is also an integer. But this element is a list, and list itself is a different data type, correct? we can say this is a heterogeneous list. Correct? I think it should be clear now. And I'll also add some multiple choice questions and tasks. So once you attempt those, you will be good to go. Now we have the 3D list. Similarly, it's also not different. First, we have this list, which is a 2D list. So we will just copy and paste that. So let's say this is 100 and 120. This is a 1D list, correct? And that list is inside another list. So this becomes a 2D list, correct? Now, when we say about 3D list, so we can say that we have a list of lists, right? So here we have another 2D list. So for example, which contains some other values. So let's say we have some strings here. So we can say it was a buy. Okay. Again, some float values, 2, and I'll close this, and some elements here, right? So 4 and 5. So this is 2D itself, correct? This one is 2D. And when I close this, it becomes a 3D list. So the outer list is this one, correct? This one. And then we have this list. Then actually, I forgot this. So then we have this one, correct? This. So this is the second. This is the outer list. So first list. This is second list. And now this one is inside that. So this one is a third list. So we have 3 lists, and it is the 3D list. Like we can have more dimensions, 4D, 5D also. But for now, I think 3D is enough for you. And you can also identify the list with the number of opening brackets or closing brackets. So here you can clearly see that we have 3 opening brackets, and also the closing brackets are also 3. So you can think like that also. Here 2 brackets, and here is only 1 bracket. So this is how this works. And now you tell me that whether this list is homogeneous or heterogeneous. This is the outer list, correct? This one. In that we have 2 elements. First is this element and another is this element, right? So this outer list has 2 elements. This outer 3D list has 2 items, which are a 2D list. And this 2D list has 4 items. So one is a 1D list and another are the integers. Similarly, this also has 3 items. This one is a 1D list and these are the integers. When we ask that whether the outer list 3D is homogeneous or heterogeneous, we can clearly say that this is a homogeneous list. Why? Because it has only 2 elements and both are the list. And you know that when we have same data type, it becomes a homogeneous. So these were the explanation of homogeneous, heterogeneous, 1D, 2D and 3D list. Now I will quickly explain you how to access these items and how to add some items in a list. Okay, so first we'll quickly see here, then we will move to the examples. Okay, so for example, you have a list. Okay, I'll write it here, accessing items. So accessing. So generally we can access any item of the list with the 3 ways. The first is positive indexing. Second is negative indexing. And the last is slicing. Correct? How does this positive indexing works? So for example, we have a list as trade logs, correct? Which have the items. Let's say it was the opening price. Then it has the name of that stock. So Apple. Then it has the selling price, which is, let's say, 109.2, and we have a boolean value which is true. So here we can say this is a 1D homogeneous list, right? Now how do we access this with the help of positive indexing? So now what you can do to access these items from the list with the positive indexing, you can write the code like trade logs, and if you want to access this value, this is at the 0 index, correct? This is at 1, at 2, at 3. So if you want to access the first value, you have to write 0. Correct? Similarly, if you want to access the last item, you have to write 3 here. It will give you the boolean value true. This is simply the positive indexing. Similarly, we have the negative indexing. So what you will do, you will write as trade logs. Then you will give, and as we know that in negative this is the value -1, this is -2, this is -3, and this is -4, right? So if you want to access this value, the last value, you have to write -1, correct? When you are using negative indexing. Similarly, you can access these value with the help of negative indexing, correct? Hope you are getting the idea. If yes, then please let me know that what improvements do you need. Then we have the slicing. Slicing is also very easy. In slicing, what happens? Let's say you just want these two values, correct? So what you can do, you can just write the code like trade logs, then it is at the index 0, right? So you will write 0 up to 1. So as we have already learned that whenever you write here, you have to write +1. So here we want the 1 index, so we will write 2, correct? So it will give us these two values. We will just see in the examples also, but for now, you just understand the concept, okay? And here also, you can use the step size. So for example, you want to access the whole list, but only with the indexes at the odd places. So you want only these values, 1 and 3, correct? These are at the odd indexes. So what you can do in slicing, you can write like trade logs, then 0 to means 0 to last, right? So you just write like this and it will give you the whole list, but with the step size. So you will give here the step size, which is 2. So what it will do, it will first print out this value, then it will print out this value. And if you have more values, then it will print out like this, 5, 7, 9. And that's how you can use the step size. Same goes for the negative indexing. So for that, you can write like trade logs. And if you want the numbers from like Apple to true, so you know that this is -3. So you will write -3 up to the Boolean value. So it will be -1, correct? But if you write -1, it will not print out that. So you just leave that. So it will give you the value from -3 to -1. So this is how it works. And we will quickly see example after this explanation. So now we have one small concept, that is adding items to the list, right? So I'll write like this, adding items, okay? So for that, we have 3 functions. One is append, second is extend, and third is insert. That's it. So how does these functions work? Let's say we have this list and we want to append one item into the list. So whenever you want to append a single item, so you can write here a single item, you have to use this append. But whenever you want to extend the list, for example, you have to add the multiple values 1, 2, 3 here, you have to use the extend function. This append will only add one value and this extend will add multiple values. So with the help of this insert function, we can add any item at the desired index. For example, if I want to insert a value at this index, this is between 0 and 1 index. So I can use here insert, let's say insert at 1 position, I'll insert 200. So what we will get? We will get the new list and that list will be having 200 at the index 1. Okay, so that's how it works. And now we will jump to the example. So you will be having a good understanding. Okay. Now, as we have already understood the concept of list in detail, so we will quickly move to the examples and we'll finish it off. So first, I'll copy and paste this list. Here you can clearly see that this is a heterogeneous list. Why? Because you can see this 100 is an integer, this BTC is a string, this is a float, and this is a Boolean value. And when we have different types of data in our list, we call it as a heterogeneous list. But what if you want to make it as a homogeneous? You have multiple options. You can make all these list items as a single data type. And how you can achieve that? You can just make it a string, this also a string, and this Boolean also a string. So once you have done that, you have made a homogeneous list. Similarly, for 2D, you have a list inside a list. So let me take this example here and I'll print it here. And what I'll do, I'll add an outer list here like this. And I'll add few more items. So now we know that this is a heterogeneous list. Why? Because the first element of this list is a list, and the second element is an integer, and third is also an integer. So it becomes a heterogeneous 2D list. Correct? You can also count the opening brackets, which is 2. And so that's why we call it as a 2D list. Similarly, you can make a homogeneous list out of this. And now we quickly move to the 3D list. So in 3D, what you can do, you know that this is a 2D list, right? So we will add another outer list here like this. Okay. And then also in the second element, I will copy and paste this exact that 2D list here. So it becomes a 3D list, right? So we know that the outer one is 3D, and inside we have two 2D lists. So it becomes a homogeneous list because this 3D list contains 2 items, and both these items are a 2D list. So when we have same data type, it becomes a homogeneous. Similarly, you can make a heterogeneous. It's very easy. So now we have type conversion. So what we can do here, we can convert any string or any other data type into a list. So how we can achieve that? For example, first we have a string here. So what I'll do, I'll just print it. So when we see that this is a string, and you can even check the type of this. So it will show that it is a string, right? Now, if you want to convert the string into a list, how you can achieve that? You will just write list and pass a function and then the list symbol. Then you will insert that particular string inside this. Okay. And when you hit shift enter, you will get a list here. You can even check the type of this. When you check the type, this is a list, right? So this is how you can use the type conversion. It will be very useful in your upcoming projects or the questions. So now let's understand how to access items from a list. We have 3 options. One is positive indexing, another is negative indexing, and then we have slicing. Let's quickly go through the examples. So let's say we have this one, right? So what we can do when we print the whole list, it will give us this output, right? But we know that this is a 2D list and this one is the first item. That means at the 0 index, correct? Then we have 200, which is an integer, and then we have 300, which is also an integer. So 0, 1, 2. So if I want this whole list, so what I can do, I can give here the 0, right? The 0th index position. And when I hit enter, I will get the first item, which is a list. But if I want the BTC value from that, so we know that this is also a list, and when we want to access an item from a list, we have to give the position of the index. So here the BTC is at the index number 1. So again we will mention the 1 here, and then we can get the BTC string, correct? So that's how we use the positive indexing. Similarly, if I want the same results with the negative indexing, so how we can achieve that? So for that, what we can do, we can quickly write here the same thing, and now let's remove. Okay, so now let's achieve the same results with the negative indexing. So what we can do, we know that this 300 is at the -1 position, right? So -1, -2, and -3. So we have to provide here the -3. So when we hit shift enter, we get this item, which is a list. But our desired result is this BTC, correct? So we know that inside this list, this is at which position? -1, -2, and -3. Same, right? So when I give here -3, I'll get the same result, right? With the positive indexing and then with the negative indexing. Now we move to the slicing. So how we can use slicing here? So if you have understood correct the strings, it is exactly the same. The indexing, positive, negative, and slicing, it's exactly the same. So that is the benefit of the Python, because everything in Python is very consistent. So if you learn one thing correctly, it will definitely help you in another things. So that's why I always say your fundamentals should be very strong, because the devil is in the details, right? So for that, what you can do, let's say we have the same list here, and I'll just comment these out. So these doesn't bother us. Okay, so for slicing, let's say you want only these 2 items, right? So what you can do, you can print trade logs, and you want only these 2 items, 0 and 1. So what you can do, you can give here a slice. First is the starting position, which is 0. And then you also want this 200, right? So what you can do, you can give here 2, because you have to give +1 index, right? So when you hit enter, you will get both these values, right? 200 and this first list. Now the same thing can be achieved with the negative slicing. So what you can do, you can print it here, and we know that we want these values. So this will be -1, -2 and -3. So we can put it here -3 up to -2, correct? But we need to add +1. So what we will do, we will add -1 and we get the same results, correct? So these are very basic, and if you attempt some questions, it will be very easy for you. So just go and attempt all the MCQs and all the tasks and then mini project. Now we move to the next topic, which is adding items in the list. We have three options here: append, extend and insert. So first we check the append here. So let's say we have this list here, which is a 2D list. Let's say we have this list and I want to append a single item. As we have already discussed this topic in the starting, so if you're getting any issue, just go to the start and watch it again. Okay, so what we can do here, I want to add let's say trade logs dot append. Okay, so I'll give here any string, let's say let's give my name here, and when I print the trade logs, I'll get the Kuldeep appended at the last. So by default, this append function adds a single item at the last. Okay, similarly, the extend function can be used to add multiple items in a list. For example, you have the same list again and you want to add another list. So what you can do, let's say you have a list with the name by condition, right? For example, and there you can say that a by parameter string, then a boolean, which is true. And let's say you have float, which can be a price. So 112.8. So now you want to extend the original list with this second list. So what you can do, you can just apply the function extend. So trade logs dot extend, and here you can give this list, right? And when you print the trade logs again, you will get a new list with the values appended. But here is a catch. You have to make sure that append is used only for a single item and extend is used only for multiple items. So if you get confused and instead of giving multiple values here, you just give a string here. So for example, instead of multiple values, you have given a single string here. So now pause the video and let me know the answer in the comments. I'll just wait for a few seconds. Okay, let me show you. When I hit shift enter, I get the values like this. So what we can conclude, that extend has an inherent property which always adds multiple items to a list. Okay, similarly this can happen to append also. So here instead of a single string, you are providing multiple values, right? So let's say we are adding this list again here. So what I'll do, I'll just provide here a list instead of a string, and when I hit shift enter, you will get a new list like this. So you can see that only one item has been added into that list, and that whole item is itself another list. So that's how append and extend works. Please practice these. These are very basic but very important. Okay. Then we have insert function. So with the help of insert function, you can add an item at your desired index position. So how it works, let's say you want to add another string at the index position 1. Currently, BTC is at the index position 1, but you want another item. It can be a string, list, anything. So let's say I want to add a trade logs dot insert, and so here you have to first give the index position. So I'll be giving 1, and then I want to add ETH. Okay. So when I print this list, it will give me a new list and it will look like this. Correct. So what if I wanted to add something here? Here we know that this whole list at the 0 index, 0, 1, 2. So at the 1 index, it was 200. So what we did, ETH has been added to this position and we have given a new list. So with this mistake, we have another very interesting concept, that is, what if I wanted to insert an item in a 2D list? So let's say here we want to insert this ETH. So with this way, we cannot achieve that, right? We've seen that it will be added in the first list. So for that, what we need to do, we need to access this item first. So for that, you will add 0 here. And when you hit shift enter, you will get the desired results. So this is how it works, and you have to attempt some questions, then only you'll be able to grasp the concept. So now we move to the next concept, which is editing item in a list. We have already done the adding of item is also an editing. So here we will see editing with indexing and editing with slicing. So let's take this same list again. Okay, let's say I want to edit this value, correct, 200, and I want Ethereum here. So what I can do, we know that this is the item of the outer list, right? And this is at the index 1. So what we can do, we can simply write trade logs, and then you have to give the index position 1 and just provide ETH. And when you print this again, you will get ETH at the place of 200. So what if I wanted XRP at the place of BTC? So for that, what you can do, first you will access the first item, correct? So it will be accessed. Then again, you will access this BTC, which is at the index 1. Then you can give here the XRP, correct? And when you print this list, you will get XRP at the position of BTC. So that's how the editing with indexing works. Then we move to the next, which is slicing. So for slicing, what you can do, I'll just comment these values because this might create problem. Slicing is simple. We have already done in the indexing. So let's say you want to change all these 4 values, correct? So what we can do, first we will access the first item, which is 0. So we'll be able to enter in this list. Then here we can give an index. So it will be the whole list, right? So you can just give a single column and then equals to, and now you can give your values. So it will be a list. So I'll give 300, and then at the place of BTC, I can give, let's say, XRP. Then at 1110, I'll give 120, and at true, I'll give false. Okay. And then I'll just print this list. So I'll get the values as 300, XRP, 120, and false. So this is how you can use slicing while editing. Then we have the next topic, which is deleting items from a list. So here we know that we can edit, we can delete the items from a list because lists are mutable, whereas strings are immutable. We cannot make changes in the strings. But as we know that lists are very flexible, so we can edit any item on the list. So if I want to delete a list, so what you can do, you can first, I'll print the list. So here you can see we have the, let me remove this, let me copy this one. So let's say I have this list and I'll print it first. So print and trade logs. So here we get the whole list. But if I delete the list, delete and trade logs, and when I again print it, it will throw me an error, right? Because it is not existing, it has been deleted. So that's how the delete works. And if you want, you can use indexing also here. So I'll just comment these out and I'll copy and paste this list here. And here I just want to remove, let's say, this value 200. So what I can do, I can give delete and trade logs and the index position, which is 1, right? And when I again print this trade logs, you can see that 200 has been removed. Similarly, we have slicing. So that's also very easy. So for slicing, what we can do, we will remove these BTC and 1109. So del, then trade logs. First, we will access the first list. Then we will give the index position. So from 1, because BTC is at the index position 1, from 1 to 3, right? Because we have to give +1. So when we print this, oh, we have to remove this. So we get the value as, because these values has been removed. Now we have removed pop and clear. So these also have some interesting functions. So let's learn them one by one. So in remove, what happens? You can remove any item with the value. So let's say here we don't have the index position. So what you can do, you can just give the value here. So trade logs, remove, and let's say I don't want this value 300. So you can just give here 300, and then you can print this list again, and you can see that 300 has been removed. But what if you wanted to remove this BTC? So for that, what you can do, first you have to access this list, so which is at the 0th index. So here I'll give the index 0. Then here I can give a string, which is BTC. And when you hit shift enter, you can see that BTC has been removed. So this is how remove works. Generally, it is used when you have dynamic data. So in trading, the data is always dynamic, and you want that some kind of stock name or some kind of price you don't want to trade, you can just mention here and you can make it work, correct? So now we have pop. So for pop, by default, it removes the last item in a list. So if you just write trade, and if you don't give any index here, so it will remove the last item of a list. So when you print it again, you can see that 300 has been removed. But if you give an index position, let's say we want to remove this true here, right? So first we will access this list. Then I can give the index position of this. So it is 0, 1, 2, 3. And when I give 3 here, you can see that true has been removed. You can also use the negative indexing here. So you can just give -1. For that also, you will get the same results. Clear. Now we have clear. So for clear, it's very simple. You can clear a list, means you can clear the items of a list. Instead of deleting, you can just make a list empty. So let's say we have this list, and first I'll print the list. Okay. Then I'll apply the clear function on the list. So clear, and then again I'll print that list. So trade logs. Okay, now it is printing, correct? Let me give here a print, and because if you don't give print, it will print out the last value. So that is important to apply. Okay, now you can see that first it printed the list with the values, but when we clear, it is giving us an empty list. So this is how clear works, and these all functions are very useful. You just practice few questions and you are good to go. Now we have the operations on lists. So we have 3 operations: arithmetic, membership, and loop. And these are exactly the same which we have learned in the strings. So let's quickly understand them. So for arithmetic, okay, let's copy and paste this list here. Okay. So in arithmetic, we have only 2 operations: addition and multiplication, correct? So let's say we have another list, and the name of that list is stock details, and let's give it the value 100 and 120. Now if you want to use the addition operation here, so what you can do, you can create a new list equals to trade logs plus stock details. And when you print the new list, it will be printed out, and you can see that it has been merged, or you can say it has been concatenated, correct? And for the multiplication, that's also very simple. Like you have this list here, and let me just comment this out. Like you have this list, and when you apply the multiplication, okay, so you will get the same value multiplied. So we have one list, and when we multiply it, so you will get 2 values. So if you want the same list like 10 times, 20 times, you can do that. Like this is one of the use case of the multiplication. Sometimes it's also used. Then we have loops. So in loops, let's say we have again the same list, and what we can do here, let's say we apply a for loop. So for I in trade logs, and we can print I here. So it will print out all the items, and here we know that this list is also an item, so it will print it as a single value, correct? But if you want to print these values also, you can apply another function inside this, and you can do that, correct? So for example, for trade logs, and you will give an index of 0, and when you print that, you will get all the values inside this first list. This is how the loops works in list. Now we have some functions. Basically, we have covered most of the functions already, but there are few functions which are also used in the list. So let's take them one by one quickly. With the help of length function, what you can do, let's say len, and then you give a list. So the len function will print out the total number of items inside that list. So when we hit shift enter, it will give us 3 because 1, 2, 3, right? Similarly for the minimum, when you apply this minimum function here, it says not supported between instances of, okay, so yeah, it's also a good idea, because here we know that this minimum max works only on the homogeneous list. So here we know that this is a list and these are integers, so it will not work here. For that, you have to take another list, and let's say we have we have this list, and I'll remove this, and now it becomes a homogeneous because all are integers. And when I apply minimum here, it will give me 100, and same goes for the max also. So it will give me the max, right? 300. Sorted. So for sorted, it will just sort the values inside a list. So when you apply this, you will get all the values sorted. So by default, it sorts in ascending position, but you can make that reverse by applying the reverse equals to true, right? So when you give this, you will get the values in descending order, correct? Then we have the count. So in count, what happens? Let's say we have this list and we have multiple values. So I'll just give a comma here, and okay, so we have 100 4 times, like we have all these values 4 times. So when I apply the count function here, trade logs dot count, and I'll just give a value 100. So the count function will give us the number of times that item exists in the list, right? So we know that 100 exists 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Then we have the reverse. So reverse is also very interesting. So what you can do, you can just apply the reverse function here. Trade logs dot reverse. So when you apply reverse function, you have to be very careful because it permanently reverses the value. So when you hit shift enter, it doesn't give any output. So in Python, there is a thumb rule that if you don't get any output after applying any function, that means that that thing has been applied permanently. So you have to be very careful before applying this reverse function. And now when you check the trade logs, you can see that it has been reversed, that too permanently, correct? But we had the sorted, it was just doing that temporarily, right? But the reverse function reverse the items permanently. So make sure that you know that. Same thing goes with the sort. Okay, now we have another function, the sort. So let's compare this with sorted. So what happens? Sorted perform the operation temporarily, but sort make the changes permanently. So let's see it live. Let's say first we will apply the sorted, and then we will apply sort, and then we will print both the outputs. So let's say we have this sorted, and we'll apply the function here, and then we will print the original value of trade logs. Then again we apply the sort here, and we print it again, correct? So, and when I hit shift enter, you can see that first it applied the sorted, and then we printed, so we get the original value because it didn't make any permanent changes. But when we apply the sort function here, you can see that it printed out the new value, which is permanently changed. So that's how it works. So what we can do in order to avoid these problems? So at that place, you can use copy function. So what does copy do? It will just make another copy of a list at some different memory address. So how does it work? Let's say we have this trade list. So we can print the list, and then we again print the memory address of this list. So print and print ID of this, right? Okay. Now what we do, we make a copy of this trade logs. So trade logs dot copy, and let's say we assign it to the new variable, new trade logs, correct? And again we print this. We print this new trade logs, and now we print the memory address of this, correct? So ID, and when we hit shift enter, we get these value. See, both the list have exactly the same item, same value, correct? The trade logs and the new trade logs. But when we print the memory address of those lists, you can see that the trade logs is stored at this location 0864, and the new trade logs is stored at 1120. So that's how these works. So generally, when you want to make some changes, you should be using this copy function. It's very useful and very helpful, correct? Now let's start one of the most important concept of Python list, which is list comprehension. So what is list comprehension? List comprehension provides a concise way of creating list. Means we can create complex list in just a single line of code. So we have few advantages of list comprehensions, which is it is more time efficient and space efficient than loops. So means Python recommends that you should be using list comprehension instead of for loops. It requires fewer line of, like you can create a complex list in just a single line of code, and it transforms iterative statement into a formula. So let's see how does it work. So for example, we want to create a list, right? What we can do, we can give a new variable name. So let me give a name, a new list. Then you have to provide the list symbol, which is the square brackets. So inside that, first you have to write the expression, right? So expression, I'll just explain you in a bit what does it mean. Then you have to write for, right? For, then any name. So you can give here, like generally we give I. So for I, then in your iterable, right? So it could be anything, your iterable. Let me delete this and we will add it later on. Your iterable, then your condition. Okay, so here it will be condition. So let's say we have a if condition. So if, and then you can write the condition. Condition. Okay, let's say equals to true. Correct. So this is the basic formula. I know it's look very difficult, but let me quickly make it so easy for you guys. Okay, so for that we have to go to the screen. For example, if you want to add 1 to 10 numbers to a list, so you want a list which contains the numbers from 1 to 10. First we declare an empty list, then we apply the for loop. So for I in range of 1 to 11, right? Because it will not include the last number 11, it will just give us the one value less, right? So that's why we are writing 11. Then what we will do, we will append this I, right? So append and I. So the first time the I will become 1, then 2, 3, 4 and up to 10. Then what we will do, once it has done the append, we will print the final list. So we can see that we have a new list which contains all the numbers from 1 to 10. But what if when I tell you that we can achieve this same result in just a single line of code? So how we can do that? We can take help of lists. So first, as per the formula, we create a list, and inside that, how I do this? First, I will run the for loop, right? So for I in range of 1 to 11, the same like the general loop. Then here I will give the expression, right? So I'll just give a space, and then here what I'll do, I'll print I. Okay, so in the first iteration I will be equals to 1, then 2, 3, 4 and so on and so forth. So now if you just hit shift enter, you will get the same result, right? So we have achieved this code with just a single line of code, and that's really powerful, right? Because when we have thousands lines of code, it really makes a difference, right? It really makes a difference. So that's how you can do this. And so next example, we have scalar multiplication on a vector. So what we can do, we have a list, and let's say it have the vectors as 2, 3 and 4. Okay, and the scalar, let's say we have negative of 3, and what we want that we get a result with 3 into 2, 6, negative 6, negative 9 and negative 12, right? So if you just do like v into s, you will get an empty list, right? But to achieve that result, what you have to do, you have to run a for loop. So for I in v, correct? Because this is an iterable. Then what you will do, you will multiply I with s, and here also you have to declare an empty list. So let's say L equals to empty list, and then you will append that value to the list, and here you can print the new list, right? So let's say we have this L, and when you hit shift enter, you have the values. But instead of this, we have the list comprehension. So how we can do that? You can just go and write first the empty list, okay? Then you run the for loop. So for I in this vector, right? So for I in v, then what I want that the value of s should be multiplied with the I, right? So here I can just give I multiplied by s. Okay, and when you hit shift enter, you have the results, right? See the power of list comprehension. Just a simple line of code and it makes our life so easy. Now we have add squares. Now for example, we have this list, and what we want a new list with the number squared. So what we can do, so generally we declare an empty list. So let's say s is an empty list. Then for I in L and I multiplied I square, and then we can add this to the empty list, right? So s dot append. Now we can just print the s. Oh, I have to give it capital S, and we have the new list with the number squared. But now we know how to apply the list comprehension here. So what we can do, we can create an empty list, then we will run a for loop. So for I in s, oh no, for I in L, because that is a list, and then here I can just give I square 2. That's it guys. When you hit shift enter, and you will get your desired values. Now we have the two ways to traverse a list. So one is item wise, another is index wise. So what we can do, let's say we have this list, right? This one, I'll just copy and paste this here, and well, let's take the list above, right? The RL list, this one, right? The trade logs. So here we will traverse a list item wise. So we have trade logs equals to this list, and so now let's traverse this list with item wise. So how we can achieve that? For I in trade logs, and then print I, correct? So if you hit shift enter, all the items will be printed out, because you know that this list itself is an item. It will be printed out as an item. So we have 3 items in this list, and we have those values. And let's say if you wanted to print only the items of this first list, so what you can do, you can just give here 0, and all those items will be printed out. Next we have to traverse a list index wise. So what you can do, you can simply copy and paste the same list here, and now you want to traverse index wise. So what you can do, you can write like for I in range of 0, then length of this list, right? So that is trade logs, correct? And now if you print I, okay, you have to print like this. You have to give the trade logs and then I, so you will get the same value. So this is how you can traverse item wise and index wise. Okay, it's very easy. Just practice yourself and you will be good to go. Now we have another very important concept in Python, which is zip. So the zip function returns a zip object, which is an iterator of tuples, where the first item in each past iterator is paired together, and then the second item in each past iterator are paired together. If the past iterators have different lengths, the iterator with the list items decides the length of the new iterator. So let's see how does it work. For example, you have two lists. Let's say L1 equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, and L2 equals to, let's make it negative, right? So -1, -2, -3, and -4. So now what I want to do, I want to add these items. So the first item of L1 to the first item of L2, the second item of L1 to the second item of L2. So similarly, it will apply for the rest of the items. So for that, you can apply the zip object. So what you can do, you can just write zip, and then you can pass the list inside it. So L1 and L2. And now when you hit shift enter, you will get a zip object, which was written here, right? The zip function returns as zip object. And now if you want to check the values, what you can do, you can just assign a list function here. And now when you hit shift enter, you will get the values in a list of tuples, correct? But still we have not achieved our target, which is to add these values. So for that, what you can do, you can apply the for loop or the list comprehension, right? So here we'll be applying the list comprehension. So what we can do, let's say we can store this value in any other variable. Let's say z equals to the function. So now what we will do, we will apply the list comprehension. So first we will declare an empty list, then for I in, now we have two items. So what we have to do, we have to write two variables. So for I comma j in z, correct? And here you can simply print those values however you want. So let's say if you wanted to print with the comma separated, what you can do, you can write like this, and when you hit shift enter, okay, you have to write a bracket here and you can get the same value, right? But it doesn't make any sense. So what you can do, we wanted to add these values, so you will just assign a addition of operator here, and now when you hit shift enter, you will get the values as 0, 0, 0, and then you will get the values as 0, 0, 0, 0. So that's the functionality of zip function, and it is also very useful. So just practice some questions. I'll be giving an MCQs and task. Now we have the final topic of the list, and I think we have covered almost all the topics in very detail. So if you cover these topics, you will not be having any issue with the list in your future again. Okay, so what are the disadvantages of Python list? Actually, we have already covered this, but let me quickly explain you again. Lists are slow. We have covered this in the starting, correct? So Python lists are slower because these store the memory addresses, not the actual values. And second is risk uses, because lists are mutable. So unlike strings are immutable, we cannot change them, but lists are mutable and we can make changes. So it becomes very risky. So we have to deal with the list diligently, carefully. Then again, eats up more memory because these are slower. Definitely it will consume more memory, right? And also these stores both the values and addresses, so it consumes more memory. So in order to resolve these drawbacks, so we came with the library which is NumPy, and there we have ND arrays. So with the help of ND arrays, we can mitigate these drawbacks at some extent, not fully, at some extent. So let me just explain you how this is risky, right? So let's say we have a list A equals to 1, 2, 3. Then what we will do, we will assign B equals to A, correct? So now when I print A and print B, I get two lists, right? And when I print the memory address of both the variables like ID A and then ID B, so you can see that the address also same, correct? So now let's say what I did, I made some, let me print it again before. Okay, so before printing I made some changes. So what I did like a delete A0, means I deleted this item, correct? The one from A. So now when I hit shift enter, you can see that it made changes in B also. So that's the issue, correct? Sometime when we have a bigger code and we are making changes in some other variables, some other list, and that is reflected into some other variables also, and it becomes so risky. So to resolve that issue, we have already studied a function. So you let me know in the comments how we can resolve this issue. So just think and let me know, and if you still have issue, then we will discuss this in the next session. It's very easy, it's very, very common. And with that being said, we have covered almost all of the topics of list in a very detailed way. And definitely if you watch the video carefully, if you practice multiple choice questions on Python list, and then again you attempt the task which is given in the description, and finally if you attempt the mini project, I can guarantee you that you will be pro in the Python list. You will never need to read this or learn this list again ever in your life. So that's it for this video. If you have any issues, any queries, we are here for you. You can let us know. Until then, bye bye, take care, have a nice day. We'll see you in the next video.